Hi, how are you? I'm Jeremy Butler. I'm right now locked in Steve's basement. Please send $1 million immediately to this address, or he's never gonna let me go. I'm Jeremy Butler. I play guitar in gag order, and I play bass in the D files. I am currently living in Hamilton, Ontario. I've lived here for about 27 years. So I moved here, like you remember. So I was born in St. John's, Newfoundland, and I moved here when I was 14, and now I live here in Hamilton. I'm not going nowhere. I love Hamilton. What got me into punk music, heavy music? I guess it was a multifaceted kind of story. So when I grew up in Newfoundland, a neighborhood I was in, everybody. This was very late 80s, early 90s. It was, the Pepsi Power 30 generation on the way to school in the morning, waiting for the bus. Everything was AC/DC, Judas Priest, Metallica. It was just getting huge. And personally, I kind of started leaning into a lot of the glam and then thrash. So it was kind of weird. But I remember the first heavy band I really got into, if you consider it a heavy band, when I was a kid, was through my parents, was Steppenwolf. And I know that sounds crazy, but they're not a punk band by any means. But man, there's for the '60s, they were so heavy. They're like such a heavy band. So as I moved on through life, I always kind of stuck into the '80s thrash stuff. Really piqued my interest, and I started playing guitar when I was around 11, and I got some heroes kind of through that. And Guns N' Roses was a huge influence to me for music. I can remember my neighbor was playing Appetite for Destruction on it at his boombox on his front step when I was a kid, and I'm like, what are you listening to? I've never heard that before. And he played it back and played it back, and they were the first band that I heard the word "fuck" in on their album. Fuck you! I'm like, what did they say? Rewind that. Oh, I can't believe they just said that. At like 8 years old or whatever it was, and my parents were always supportive in a weird way with music. They would just I would look at a tape or a record, and I'd be like, I'd like the album cover. Okay, you can have it, you know. And and my parents bought me some of the first tapes and records that I had, and I look back at it now and I go, why would you even give me that? I remember my dad on my, probably it would have been 1986. So I would have been 7, 8 years old. Gave me "Too Fast for Love" Motley Crue as my like a birthday gift. Like, if you think about that now, I would never give that to my kids for their birthday at 7 years old. My dad's an old country guy or whatever, but I liked the cover. Apparently, I liked Vince Neil and leather pants. But but that was a huge influence to me. But I guess as it went, that stuff obviously isn't punk, but records, CDs, cassettes, I was always reading the liner notes. The liner notes were so important to me. I'd sit and read the lyrics. And what I found was that most of the bands that I listened to would always talk about and reference the same bands, as influences. And, once the age of the internet kind of came around in the early 90s when I was in college and I could kind of explore stuff a little bit more, that's when the liner notes meant more. So I'd be like, okay, who is the Dead Boys? You know what I mean? Who is Johnny Thunders and the Misfits and things like that? Where a lot of the bands would always say, these are the bands that made me who I am. And then even a lot of those '80s thrash bands, Megadeth was a huge influence on me, guitar playing and stuff like that. Not that I can play like that, but. They covered the Sex Pistols on one of their first albums, and some of their first stuff was really like thrash, kind of crossover, hardcore type of stuff in the first album. The Peace Cells album, So Far So Good So What album, that kind of stuff, and that's where I really started exploring punk. And the first bands that I explored were probably the typical ones for kids my age at that time. Misfits, Ramones, obviously, Pennywise, NoFX, So the SoCal bands were really kicking off at around that time, and everybody in my neighborhood was skateboarding, and that all kind of comes with it too. Which leads me to like a second facet of my musical experience, and that's family. So getting me into punk, my sister, believe it or not, my sister was always into punk. My younger sister, even when I was in the kind of the heavier, the thrash stuff, and then even in my late teens, I spent a lot of time listening to hip hop, and she would always introduce me to other punk bands, and I don't know. I've always had this underlying love, I guess, and then eventually, when you're listening to the bands that influence your favorite bands, you start to understand that there's a reason why that they're favorite bands. So like now they're your favorite bands. You don't even listen to the bands that influenced them anymore. You've just taken it backwards. Now you're listening to bands that had happened 20 years before, right? Friends along the way too. I've always been open to people's music opinions, and I love to talk about it. So when people say listen to a band, I take it from them. I listen to them if they're recommending it to me. And so many friends along the way have introduced me to punk bands, and yeah, it's such a that question could go on for months, Steve. To tell you the truth, what got me into punk music, my life, I guess, just the way it kind of rolled into it. Uh, Musical influences, personal influences growing up. For me, I guess it started growing up in Newfoundland. Like I said, I don't know, it's a different world there, and I can't speak, obviously, for growing up in Ontario when you're a kid until I was a teenager, but growing up in Newfoundland, I feel is a little bit different. Everything is like this Celtic music influence is always there. Like everywhere you go, it's like honestly, it's like a soundtrack in Newfoundland of the Celtic music, like all the time in your life. It's annoying. Frankly, no. No, but like throughout my whole life, they start you young on music, and when I grew up in Newfoundland, my uncle's one of my dad's brother is a performing artist in Newfoundland. He has been since I was a kid. I remember watching him then. But even besides that, all my uncles and cousins, it was kind of like everywhere you go, there was guitars. There's guitars here. There's laying on the couch. There's a guitar on the wall. There's a guitar in the basement. And when you're a kid, you get curious, and you just pick up guitars. So I guess my biggest influence as growing up is my family, because it allowed me to kind of just find my way with music, and I always got support. When I wanted to join the lip sync contest at school, and, they'd help me make a cardboard guitar. You know what I mean? If I saw an album cover at the store that I thought was cool, they'd let me buy the cassette out of the Woolco bargain bin. My dad bought me my first acoustic guitar. Total fucking piece of shit. Thanks, Dad. I don't know how I ever even moved on. Like that first week, and I made it through that. Thanks for that, though, honestly. And then my mom bought me my first electric guitar when I was 11, which I still have, which is, still play it once in a while. So the family thing was huge for me. I feel like just in my personal life, music is huge. There's always music playing everywhere I go, even if it's not playing, if that makes sense. I'm singing a song in my head all the time. So yeah, it's been bred into me, I guess. And thankfully and luckily along the way, I've had a lot of people that have been willing to take a few minutes and show me how to play guitar, show me this, show me that, and just jamming with different people along the way. The list is endless for friends, for influences. Musically, I think for me now at this point in my career, it's career, like I'm getting paid for this, it's about tone for me now. You know what I mean? Like everybody's riffs, you can copy riffs and stuff, and some people do, but it's to me, I'm about copy and tone, I guess, and or getting to that point. I think I found what I want now, but like musically influence, it was always like some of the early guitars that really sung to me was Mick Mars, and that really like process strat humbucker sound. And then like I said before about like Appetite for Destruction, that to me is the perfect Les Paul guitar sound. And Poison Idea, you know, Pig Champion to me is the best punk guitar sound there is. I feel like you could put him in any band and that's the sound that you would want to hear. So like that I try to meld that all together. So that influences me when I try to create my sound in bands that I'm in. And now that I play bass for the last 5 or 6 years, that kind of creates a whole nother set of influences, because it's interesting to be influenced to play guitar your whole life and not really think about bass, and then all of a sudden, hey, you want to be a bass player? Yeah, okay. Now, so who influences you? Well, the influence is necessity, but you still have a sound that you know that you like, and there's so many great bass players in punk, and I think that is such a, you know, when you have a conversation about music and bass players, they talk about, you know, obviously the legends, you know, the guys with the 12-string basses and the Jaco Pastoriuses and the, you know, the Fleas, and don't get me wrong, fantastic guitar players, fantastic bass players, but there's so many. I'm not claiming to be any of those guys, but what I'm saying is that in punk music, the bass lines have always been prominent and driven a lot of the music, so it was kind of really cool to learn how to play bass when I got into punk music. Although I played guitar for 7,000 years at this point. So, funny story, my first concert, it was kind of a big deal, but at the time, it was the most awkward shit of my entire life, but I was excited to go to a concert. So country legend Randy Travis was in town in St. John's, Newfoundland when I was, I want to say 8. Yeah, 7 or 8 years old. But here's the fucked up part. So if my parents actually watch this, probably won't. But if you do watch this, they're going to be probably hiding shame in this story. But for shame, anyway. So right then, my parents were going through a divorce. So I don't know the full backstory on this, but long story short, my mom went to the concert with her friend. But my dad went to the concert with me because he had an extra ticket. Something tells me he bought that ticket for my mom at some point, and they didn't go together. So it was this weird backstory of my dad going, yeah, we're going to go to this concert. And I saw country legend Randy fucking Travis, who actually looks pretty, I think he's ill right now. Hope you're doing well, but I saw him online. He wasn't doing well. But anyway, long story short, on the island of Newfoundland, Randy Travis. So I would say maybe 1987, 1988. I tried to look it up, and I couldn't find it, so maybe it was just a dream. My first punk show, actual popular punk band, and I had at the time of my life. Well, I'll tell that story first. I guess my first kind of punk show was always coming to Hamilton when I was 14, 15. I used to spend a lot of time downtown and, Gore Park and hitting all the music stores when we actually had great music stores here. We had Reggie's and I had J&L Sound on that strip, and I'd just go. Me and my friends would go and, do what teenagers do, hang out downtown and annoy people, play guitars in the music store, and go home, back to the East End. But along that way, I forgot what I was going to fucking say. So fuck you, Steve. So yeah, okay. So my very first punk show that I ever went to, my sister took me to it, but before that, I did see a lot of punk bands in Hamilton. So when I was growing up, I spent a lot of time downtown Gore Park hanging out, and I spent a lot of time going to the music stores and just Jackson Square. There was always little concerts on top of Jackson Square. There was always stuff going on out in front. There's always bands playing, outside at Hess Village and things like that. And I remember some of the smaller bands, and God only knows who they were at that time. But like I said, I was heavy into the kind of the thrashy Megadeth and things like that. And I started seeing more of this stuff, and Hamilton is where I was exposed to it more than when I grew up in Newfoundland. And there's people that I know from Newfoundland in that same area that tell me that punk was definitely alive there, friends of mine. And I guess, sometimes there's parallel universes musically. But I remember vividly my very first, punk show, I guess, I don't know, in my 20s? Early 20s. My sister, of all people, took me to see NoFX, and it was NoFX and Dillinger 4, which is a great fucking band from Minneapolis, Minnesota, and they're a Fat Wreck band. They only did maybe 2 albums, but anyway, great dual vocalist punk band if you're into that. I love dual vocalist band personally. So anyway, long story short, my sister took me to this band to see NoFX, and we ate some hash brownies, and Fat Mike was in full force that night, and like I say, I was into the SoCal punk then, the Pennywise, the NoFX, and the Agent Orange, the JFA, and so that was my first real one, I think. And to this day, love it or hate it, a lot of people give me shit for liking NoFX, but they can go fuck themselves. Some of the favorite shows I've been to over the years. I still go to a lot of different type of music shows. I'm a pretty varied musically guy, I guess, if that's a thing. Musically guy.
It is now.
It is now. I remember going when I was a kid. So I say 20, 21. They used to always have these little festivals at exhibition stadium, snow jams, and they used to call them things like that. And they were so fucking sweet. They'd have an outdoor snow ramp and skate ramps middle of the summer, and they'd have all these bands come through, and it would be punk bands, it'd be heavy metal bands, it'd be hip hop groups. And being a varied person who loved all that kind of shit, those were great. I remember going to those, and it'd be a 3-day festival, and you'd see all these local bands, local punk, local hip hop artists, and then they'd have, Mighty Mighty Boss Tones closing the night, which is a hilarious and fun way to end the night, and great stuff like that. So I always have fond memories of those. But if I'm talking this concert is the shit, there's always one that I will never forget. And if anybody from law enforcement is watching this, I deny everything I'm about to say. I'm actually just doing it for the interview, but I redact everything I'm about to say. So I went to see Motley Crue and Alice Cooper in Toronto, and wow, that is a shit show of epic proportions. There's reasons why that band has killed people everywhere they've gone throughout their tours, and literally. So anyway, great show. Too much alcohol, too many people. One of the most insane pyrotechnic things I've ever seen. I always think of how great that show was. It was a lot of good people. I love outdoor shows, so anytime I go to a show at, for example, what's the place in Toronto called now? Shacklin's was great. That was insane. But what's the amphitheater? So the Molson Amphitheater, or the whatever the hell it's called now, whoever sponsored it now, every time I see a show there, it's great. So I can think of a few concerts there. Some of my favorite outdoor shows always happen there. Motley Crue, Slipknot, where I almost fucking died in a circle pit. That was only a few years ago. I just remember going to my doctor the next day because I thought I had broken ribs. And he's like, what happened? What are you doing? Well, I went to see Slipknot last night. How old are you, sir? Sorry, I'm too fucking old, apparently, to be a circle pit at Slipknot. If I could think of my all-time favorite show that I've ever been to, it's such a hard thing. I've been luckily been able to play with so many good bands in Ontario over the last 4 or 5 years. So I am a local band guy. As much as I love, some of these big bands and they come through and I want to see, like, the Motley Crues or the, Slipknots or whatever, because it's more about, seeing the experience, the pyro, the stage show, the fucking drums on a roller coaster, or whatever it is. That's cool to me, I saw Guns N' Roses at, Skydome, and just like that sheer amount of people to see a band on, like it looks like a postage stamp, just that experience. That's cool, right? I thought that was amazing. But if I had say like some of my all time favorite shows have just been playing with, some of my friends and playing with my friends' bands. I love every time I've ever played a show with Random Killing, for example. Fuck, those guys are awesome. And they put on an awesome show. So every time they're in town, I want to see them, play with them. I love fucking watching them. They're great. So one of my favorite personal shows was when in Gag Order, we opened for Random Killing, which opened for Forgotten Rebels, and put those two together, and that was a dream come true. That was a really good show, and let's do it again sometime. My absolute favorite show I was ever been to in my life that was so influential, and I almost fucking forgot about it. But, that's, don't do drugs. But, Motorhead and Valiant Thor and Clutch in Toronto, and obviously Motorhead, oh my god, I have to see Motorhead. But that was phenomenal. They were great. They fucking killed the place. It was at, I don't know, the Docks or whatever the fuck it was called at that time. It was called 27 different names, but great venue. But it wasn't, like, Motorhead was great, but it was the fact that Valiant Thor was the band that really impressed me more. I don't know if you've ever heard of Valiant Thor, but they're kind of like, I recommend checking them out. They're kind of a speed thrash crossover band, but they have, from North Carolina, and they have a pretty good following down there, but they have the dual guitar attack, Judas Priest kind of solos and shit. Really, really good. But anyway, the show was fucked up. So Clutch was on. We got there late. We were drunk as fuck. We were all drinking Jim Beam in the hotel room. It was gonna get greasy. So I walk in and I see Valiant Thor. This guy is half naked. He's wearing tight pants. He's fatter than me with a big ginger, long hair, and he's wearing red wrestling boots. Standing on top of the speaker just screaming at people. I'm like, this is going to be a hell of a show. This isn't even a Motorhead yet. So we watch them. They're great. I'm trashed. I'm outside. This guy comes up to me and asks me for a cigarette. Yeah, I can get you a cigarette. I'm like, man, you look familiar. He's like, yeah, I just played. I'm the guitar player from Valiant Thor. I'm like, but in my mind, they were still on stage. I'm like, nah. I'm like, well, you mean like you're the old guitar player? Because they're playing right now. He's like, no, I just came off stage. I'm the guitar player for Valiant Thor. And as we're talking, a fight breaks out. Two dudes start throwing punches at each other. I break it up, save the guy from Valiant Thor. You're welcome. Aiden Thor, if you're ever watching this. I saved your life that night. Probably don't remember. And you smoked my dirty Sacco Tobacco Reserve cigarettes. Yeah, that was a bonding moment between us. And then Motorhead went on, and it was an absolute shit show, and my ears didn't work for 3 days after. So that was absolutely the best show I've ever been to. All right, so past and current and bands and projects that I've been involved in. So I would say I'm kind of a late bloomer musically, because even though I started playing really young, and I always played. I was always not that social about it. It took me until I was in my 20s to be like, okay, I really want to be in a band. And when that happened, it happened fast and escalated quickly, and now I'm fucking old. But and too old, so I shouldn't even be in bands. But let me just run it down for you. I'm too old to be in bands. Let me run it down for you. So in Hamilton, I started a band called Shoulder to Blame back in, I don't know how long it was now. It was quite a while ago. And we kind of all just met up through Kijiji, believe it or not, kind of like the start of Kijiji back in the day. And those guys were all great. We had 4 or 5 different lineups. It was kind of a grunge with a little bit of punk influence, but a lot of it was a versatile band. It was kind of cool because we would do acoustic shows on a Tuesday night, and then we'd play Doors Club with some hardcore bands on a Saturday. So we kept us busy all the time, and met a lot of great musicians through that. I love those guys; they're great. Which led me actually into the D-Files, which is a band I'm currently still in. I'm not slurring my words yet. I'm currently still in the D-Files. The D-Files have been around for a long time. So that was kind of the first band that I, joined. They were looking for a bass player, and I had opened for them before, and actually they opened for Shoulder to Blame, and vice versa a few times. And got to know them a little bit. Sure enough, we hung out, and that's been going on for a while. We're looking for a drummer. Drummer. Anybody? Drummer. Steve's like. Oddly enough, weirdly through that, D-Files opened for Gag Order a few times, and through that I met those guys. They started looking for a guitar player, so that's when I joined Gag Order. So Gag Order's been going great. I've been with them since 2018. But the pandemic kind of really threw a loop into everybody's life, obviously, but it did allow me to kind of expand, I guess, my musical portfolio. So I got bored. So the first little bit of the pandemic, they made me stay home from work, not for long, but I got bored when we couldn't go to the jam spot. I got bored when we couldn't play shows, and I tried to figure out a way to create music. So by doing that, I got involved in a couple cool projects. So one was Questionable Gentlemen. So Questionable Gentlemen was basically done by myself and a bunch of friends and new friends through social media. 100% done through social media. Guys recording at home, in their basements, in their cars. I know some guys that did the vocals in their cars, so there's a rawness to some of the vocals and stuff. Some crazy talented people involved. I'm so humbled by the names that are associated with that. Just from some dick who's like, hey, I'm bored. Can you somebody send me some drums, and then I'll send the guitar back, and then anyway, check it out if you want. It's cool. Questionable Gentlemen, and then along that we did something very similar, but on a more of an international aspect called God Mode, and God Mode was run by C.J. Taylor in Scotland. Actually, lives in Scotland, and he's done some other bands, works with other bands. But long story short, he asked me while this was going on to record some bass for some stuff on his project, and I did. I recorded some guitar with that as well. They've released an EP for that. I'm always open, so I have people call me, hey, you want to play a show? Yeah. Do you want to record something with us? Yeah, I do. So I do. I just want to play. So right now, outside of that, we were working on a thing called the Bridge Street Hooligans out of Kitchener. And that's, we'll see what happens with that. Those are a bunch of guys from Kitchener, all the Backbreaker guys and Stand Against Fear guys. So we did some jamming with that. We recorded some stuff with that. So hopefully we come out with that soon. And like I said, I'm the kind of guy, I just want to play. So hit me up. Hit up the DMs. So, with boredom sometimes becomes alcoholism, but sometimes becomes creativity or a little bit of a mix of the both. So, again, I had surgery on my vocal cords, unrelated to singing. I'm not a singer. Just about a month ago. So I was off work. I was bored again. So what can I do? Well, I'm going to make some music. Well, I don't know how to make drums. I don't know how to sing. And I had surgery. So I taught myself to program drums, and long story short, just last week, now that I've recovered from everything, I recorded some vocals. Hilarious, by the way, hearing your own voice for the first time after you had a surgery on your vocal cords. But so I've released another album. I released an EP, I guess you can call it. Call it an album like I'm a singer-songwriter. That's not the case. I call it Downfall of Sobriety because it was recorded and written because I couldn't have a beer and I couldn't smoke a joint because I had surgery on my throat. So I'm sitting at home writing music. The Downfall. Anyway, yeah, check it out. Downfall of Sobriety is my solo project. It's got a little bit of grunge. It's got a little bit of indie. It's got a little bit of D beat, a little crust punk on there. So I don't know. Figure it out. I don't know what the fuck it is. Craziest thing when you see at shows, like obviously playing in punk shows and playing even with like different hardcore bands and stuff, you see some pretty rowdy, crazy shit going on, and there's always that one guy, settle the fuck down, man. You're not a ninja. You don't need to throw your arms around like that. Settle the fuck down. Of course, everybody's got that story, I guess. I've seen some pretty crazy mosh pits where it's like, I don't know how the hell you survive that. But one of the coolest mosh pits I've ever seen, so I guess it's crazy, but I think it was really cool. And at the time, it was, I can't believe this is happening, but it was a really cool moment. It was at a No Effects show, actually, and sorry if I pronounce her name wrong, but I think it's Talia. They sing the song it's Nubs, and the girl, who, if you don't know the story, doesn't have arms or legs, and they wrote a song about her, and it's a great song, and she was at the concert, and they picked her up and threw her into the crowd, and she crowd surfed the entire time, and it was fucking awesome, and everybody was into it, and just I've never seen anything like that before, and that was probably the craziest thing I've ever seen before at a show. I think we can all talk about drunken idiots that we've seen jump off shit or throw stuff at you, or I've gotten hit with a Christmas tree at a show before, but just to kind of see, like, as a crowd moving like that was, I don't know, I've never seen anything like that before, so cheers to her, and that was a cool show. So, what I like most about pretending to be a musician, which is there's a lot of perks, I guess, to pretending to be a musician. One, I get to wear sunglasses on the inside a lot, which is kind of expected. You get to drink beer at all hours of the day without any question. You're just expected to be a dirtbag like that, so that's cool. But what I love most about being a musician really is it's a toss-up. The creativity side is always something that was important to me. I need an outlet to kind of express my creativity, whatever that means. When I was young, I started with drawing and stuff, and it led to guitar, and it led to creating music, and it still does. So even now that with new technology, it's even easier to create music. So I think I love that side, the creative side. I love performing. Performing is super important to me, and I think I can speak for most people who has performed on stage, is that it's addictive. So once you do it, it's that adrenaline rush that you need again. And if you have an addictive personality that leads you to drink too much or smoke too much, or I don't know, spend too much money, gamble too much, watch too much porn, whatever it may be, all of those things, then let's hang out. But 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 the reality of it is, the musician aspect, that rush is, it feels good. It feels great, just like any sort of endorphin addiction, I guess, does. But the downside of that is kind of the same thing. If you can have the greatest show of your life and feel great, and you're like, shit, my guitar was in tune the entire show. I feel like we jammed as a unit. It felt great, and then then you see a clip of it, or like one guy outside, I'd be like, oh, pretty good show, or like something will trigger your insecurity, and then it's like, now that's the only thing you remember about that show. So now you've built up this show, and you went out there and you left it all on the line. You had blood, sweat, and tears, which I honestly literally bleed almost every show, because apparently I'm a horrible guitar player and I just destroy my hands every show. But besides leaving the blood, sweat, and the beers, you kind of have that afterglow effect that can be great, or it can be devastating. And when you see, you hear about a lot of the horrible shit that happens to musicians over time. A lot of that is that after effect, that come down off the endorphins, and they fill the voids with other things and end up down dark paths and shit like that. So it is a vicious cycle, and I think a lot of musicians can attest to what I'm talking to. For me, it's always the self-doubt the next day. Fuck, I fucked up that one song. Now that's going to live with me for the rest of my life. Meanwhile, not one single person in Doors Pub, when you're playing with your amps turned to some ungodly volume, heard that you played a fucking fret lower than you should have, because you're bashing on your bass like an idiot. But in your head, as a musician, some of us, I think a lot of us, have that kind of perfectionist attitude. So that's what I love and hate about being a musician. Also, when you're a musician, people give you a lot of free beer. Okay, so here's my useless talent. Number one, I can take my thumb off. I don't think. Can you guys take your thumb off?
How did you do that?
I know. Hey! But my actual useless talent, this is fucking weird. And the weird thing is that only most of my family have this same talent, or I don't know, ability, whatever you want to call it. So I can only wink with my left eye. I can't physically wink with my right eye. I can't do it no matter how hard I try. So I'll wink my left eye, which is kind of weird, but like, here's me trying my hardest to wink with my right eye. Like, I can't do it. Isn't that fucked? Like, why can't I wink with that? Does this side of my face not work properly or something? My favorite food, besides malted barley, has got to be, absolutely, without a doubt, Taco Bell. And I had to think about this, and maybe it wasn't without a doubt, because I also love pizza and hamburgers, and look at me, for God's sakes. Do you think it's fucking lettuce? I like food. I'm a foodie. I love Hamilton because of the food. The city has so much good food. But if I am in a pinch and I want to eat food, Taco Bell always comes through. And it's good for your health because it cleanses you and keeps your dietary tract clean and all that kind of shit, literally.